York's highest court has declined to block Donald Trump's upcoming sentencing in his hush money case, leaving the U.S. Supreme Court as the president-elect's likely last option to prevent the hearing from taking place tomorrow. Trump has asked the U.S. Supreme Court to block his sentencing in the hush money case. Trump's legal team turned to the Supreme Court after the New York courts denied their request to delay the sentencing by Justice Merchan, who convicted Trump last May on 34 felony charges of falsifying business records. Trump denies any wrongdoing. His lawyers argue that going ahead with the sentencing now would unfairly limit his ability to prepare for office. While the judge has indicated that he won't impose jail time, fines or probation, Trump's lawyers say a felony conviction would still have serious long-term effects. To talk about this, I'm joined at this hour by Jonah Blank, former advisor to President Biden, Ananda Ahuja, New York-based attorney, and the Vice President for Indian Americans for Donald Trump, Professor Zenia Behel. She is a professor and a political analyst. Good evening to you all. Let me go over to Zenia. Zenia, how do you see Trump's move appealing to the Supreme Court to halt his conviction, saying that that presidential immunity applies?
So it's quite interesting that Trump has appealed to the Supreme Court, which has a conservative majority, to intervene in this case, right? And if you recall, the Supreme Court had declared that presidents do have immunity from their actions in official capacity as opposed to their actions as a personal citizen, right? So that's what essentially Trump is using or leveraging to have the Supreme Court block Friday's sentencing by the New York Court of Appeals, which is the highest court of New York. However, those were his actions as a private citizen, particularly. So let's see how what the Supreme Court decides, whether or not there will be a decision to block the sentencing. But Trump is making that last-ditch effort, because if he is convicted, that will make him the first president to have a dubious record and to be a convicted felon when he actually takes oath and goes to the White House.
Let me go over to Mr. Ahuja and ask, should the Supreme Court at all have been dragged into this matter?
Yes, ultimately the matter goes to Supreme Court if the state's highest court basically has given a particular decision and if one particular party is not happy with that particular decision, then the ultimate objective is to go to highest court of the land, that is the Supreme Court. And I believe that Donald Trump and his attorneys, they basically took a very wise decision by knocking the doors of Supreme Court. Now the question is, from various angles, one has to analyze this particular situation, not only from the legal point of view, but from the political point of view and from the practical point of view also. The question is, number one, if Trump is sentenced tomorrow, even though the judge is saying that he has no such intention of imposing any prison or any is going to be unconditional basically charge. But the question is, number one, what if tomorrow judge changes his mind? There is no such guarantee that there will be unconditional kind of sentencing or unconditional kind of decision. Now the question, and the other question is from political point of view, if Trump, these charges stay there, then the question comes about the foreign travel of President of the United States. Some countries like Japan, like United Kingdom, like Australia, they have provisions that if you have been a convicted felon in a particular country, then it becomes difficult for you to travel to those countries. Now, as a president of the United States, whether Trump will be, it will be easy for Trump to travel to those countries or not. If you remember, George Bush pleaded guilty of drunken driving, And then it became a problem for George Bush to travel to those countries, and every time he had to request for the waiver. So from political point of view, from practical point of view, as a president, Donald Trump is to discharge certain official duties. It will be a big hindrance for Donald Trump if these charges stay there to discharge those official duties. So one has to look into from various angles this particular case, not only just because it is a private individual in a private capacity,
Right.
Donald Trump did something. Now the question is, he is a president of the country. If the masses in the country, if the voters in the country, they have elected him as president of the country, then it becomes duty of the judicial system also to let him discharge his official duties effectively.
Mr. Blank, how do you react to that? Mr. Ahuja saying that it is up to the court to let Trump discharge his duties because he has been elected by the people of United States of America.
Well, that has nothing to do with the case that the Supreme Court is being asked to decide. For starters, the Supreme Court is allegedly supposed to make rulings on the law, not on what their own personal political views might be. Now, this particular court has discredited itself so much that a majority of the American people, 52% in the latest Gallup poll, have no confidence that it will do that. 6 of the 9 members were appointed by partisan Republicans, 3 of them by Mr. Trump himself. So this is going to be a political judgment rather than a legal judgment. But let's be clear. Nobody is predicting that Donald Trump is going to be sent to prison. Even if Juan Merchan, the judge, had not already taken that off the table, he could have, and in my view should have, imposed a sentence of prison to be delayed until after Trump is out of office. There is absolutely nothing whatsoever other than Donald Trump's own personal vanity at stake here.
Right. Zenia, let me ask you, could Trump's sentencing impact his return to the White House, even though Judge Merchan has indicated that he'll not be given jail time?
I do not think it will impact his return to the White House, right? He is the president-elect. He has the popular vote. Despite this trial, despite this ongoing trial, he was elected as the president of the United States, and he has popular support. He is the popular president. Also, he, likes to call himself, a populist president. So I don't think it's severely going to impact his journey to the White House at all. The inauguration will happen as is. However, it may impact public sentiment about him, because at the end of the day, he will be the first president, as I said, with a dubious record and a felon and a convicted felony charge to actually head to the White House, right? Now, if the Supreme Court decides that he does in fact have immunity, because these were acts carried out as a president of the United States, then he no longer needs to worry about it at all. But because these were business transactions that happened while he was an acting private citizen, it'll be interesting to see what the verdict is and what the Supreme Court decides. And as I said, the Supreme Court has a conservative majority. So, as my fellow panelists said, this will likely be more of a political decision than a decision to uphold the law. So let's see what happens. But the president-elect seems to be, he's making a last-ditch effort, definitely. So he's very worried about it. But
Right.
will it impact his path to the White House? I highly doubt it.
Zenia, I'll have to ask you a quick last question. If this is postponed by chance tomorrow, when would Trump would Trump be facing the sentencing in this case? Is there a timeline today?
So I don't have much information about that, but I can tell you this: if it's, if it happens after the inauguration, then it happens to a sitting president in the White House, right? And it'll be symbolic again, because he will be the first president with a felony charge to be sitting in the Oval Office. So I'm not very well aware of the timeline. Probably my fellow panelists can comment on that. But it will be a symbolic moment and a rather historic moment for an acting president of the United States.
Thank you, Ms. Behel, Mr. Ahuja, and Mr. Blank for joining me on the broadcast.